So your friends didn't show up for game night. I'm so sorry, but I have the perfect craft for you to make while you cry. I'll show you how you can make your tokens look like this. We're making tokens. So make sure you go back and watch part 1 if you haven't seen it already. This craft requires blood, sweat. Yeah, that's right. Tears. But after that, you will be rewarded with, do I dare to say, the ultimate token upgrade. You just need to be realistic. They probably just don't like you. The technique I used to make these tokens look, feel and even sound great was resin. I've tried these 2 different brands and I will talk about them more later. Before you start, get your favorite board game that you want to upgrade and answer these questions. How are you going to use your tokens during the game? Do you draw them out of a bag? Then you might want to improve the tactile feel and apply lots of resin on both sides to have them nice and domey. But in Quacks, for example, after you draw them, you place them on a board. And here the dome effect got a bit annoying. If you want the token to stay in place on the board and not wobble, then you might want to apply resin only on one side. And by doing that, you essentially cut your workload by half. And maybe that's important to you. We decided to apply a small amount of resin on both sides to get the best of both worlds. This way we improve the tactile feel but also let them sit relatively flat on the board. Next you want to prepare your workspace. A silicone mat or baking paper protects your work surface, and if you spill resin you can easily remove it after it hardens. A bonus with silicone is that the rubbery texture helps to keep the tokens in place, whereas on baking paper they can still slide around. Under the whole process you want to minimize dust, so it's a good idea to roll your silicone mat with a dust roller. Before you start, you also need to think about the drying station for your tokens. You need a level surface for them to dry on. This is important to ensure that the resin hardens evenly on the token and doesn't pool to one side. We tried to think of an interesting way to teach you about safety, but it wasn't so easy. So we decided to have a meeting. Hi and welcome to the meeting everyone. Today we are talking about safety to this demographic. Yeah, it's hard, okay, but how can we do it entertaining? Where's Runita? Runita, we're having a meeting.
Shh, I'm trying to play a game. Hello, welcome back to the stream. If it's your first time here, let me explain some safety tips which you can also use in real life. So epoxy resin is made up of 2 liquids, a resin and a hardener. When you mix them together, a chemical reaction occurs that changes the mixture into a very durable plastic. This chemical reaction also lets off poisonous fumes, and so that's why we must wear a respirator with a gas filter. You can't just use a regular mask. So the gas filter needs to cover organic fumes, so make sure that you read up on the type of resin that you're going to use so that you get the right type of filter for your resin. Many brands claim to be poisonous free, but if you actually read carefully on the bottle, it'll still say that you need to use a respirator, so make sure you do that research. Goggles, gloves, and clothes that you don't really care about is also a good idea to wear. So, okay, I'm gonna play with full safety gear, and I think that you guys should as well. Alright, let's go! Let's do this!
Good job, Ronita. Great safety demonstration. Promotion for you. And now, speaking of safety, Zach, you got some feedback on our latest video that you didn't follow our safety guidelines. Is there anything you would like to say to our audience? Whoops. Good thing I didn't let you play Resin Simulator. Hi everyone and welcome to the stream. Today we're taking a look at Resin Simulator. Let's go. Okay, I'm not going to play a girl. Clothes. What clothes should I have, chat? What clothes? Naked? Guys, come on. No. Chat. Safety gear. We don't need that, right? Oh, let's go. How you measure and mix your resin depends on what brand you're using. Some measure by weight and some by volume. Whatever resin you go for, it's extremely important to be exact to ensure that your resin will cure properly. If the ratio is just slightly off, this can make your tokens unusable and will probably make you very sad. If you'll measure by weight, then we recommend to use a gram scale, preferably with decimals. This will ensure you to get perfect results every time. Stir thoroughly for several minutes until the liquid becomes clear and even, and stir slowly to avoid bubbles. The first technique involves dropping resin onto one side of your token using a pipette, and spreading it out with a toothpick or a paintbrush if the viscosity is low enough. Before applying resin, it's important to varnish your tokens in order to protect them with at least 2 coats. This is how they can look if you don't do it. Some of the resin can get sucked up by the cardboard and damage the prints. To know how to varnish your tokens and prepare them for resin, you can watch part 1 here. And by the way, do you remember the tokens that got stuck to my pegboard that I had a hard time removing? I tried everything. And finally they came off. But as you can imagine, they looked horrible. But this is what they look like now, with resin. The resin really helped to hide those imperfections, and I actually think they look great now. With this experience in mind, I didn't want to ruin good tokens when experimenting with resin, so I tried to find my useless token that I don't really care about. But I couldn't find it, so I decided to make my own instead. The interesting thing with these tokens that I made is that you have to do what they say. The most efficient way we found was to apply resin on several tokens first, and then spread it out to the edges. In this way, the resin has time to pull out to the edges, so you only need to guide it the last bit. If you don't have a silicone mat, I'll recommend you to use a toothpick to hold your tokens in place. How many drops you need depends on the brand you're using and what effect you want. For these tokens we used 5 drops. Just to clarify, we used 5 drops on the front side of the token, the side with a slightly curved edge. The back side we used 9 drops, and that's the side with a sharper edge. This is because you need to compensate for the larger surface area, so that your dome effect will look even. In one sitting, I usually do 30 to 40 tokens before the resin starts to harden. But you can prolong the work time a little bit by placing your beaker in warm water. When you've applied resin to your liking, you can heat the surface with a lighter to get rid of the bubbles. Then leave your tokens to dry. I also cover them just in case, so that dust doesn't get stuck and dry permanently on. With this technique, I stabbed my tokens with a pin and dropped them in my beaker of resin. Try to shake off as many drops of resin as possible and spin the token slowly to even out the resin. Then leave to dry. We tried leaving them to dry horizontally and vertically, and here you can see the results. The pros with this method, if you get it to work, is that you will have the whole token covered in resin apart from the little hole where the pin was placed. In the first technique we didn't apply any resin on the sides. The cons is that it won't be a perfect even surface. In my opinion, this works best with a resin that has a lower viscosity, like Epoxy. When you're done, store your resin in a dark and dry place. I found the first technique easier to control and gave more consistent results, even though it was a little bit more time consuming. So this is the technique I will use going forward. And a big shout out to the Reddit and board game community. Check out the description for useful links where I got inspiration that helped me with this project. I've also listed the materials in the description together with some affiliate links. I really liked the silicone mat, but the other silicone equipment wasn't as easy to clean and reuse as I had hoped for. Of course, you can also use one-use plastic containers and craft sticks. We have not linked any respirator because I don't want to be responsible for your death, and that's because I can't guarantee what filter is required for your resin. But what resin should you use? First, we bought this jewelry resin from Pudo. They seemed popular and had good reviews, but after we used it, we got a sore throat, and that's why we emphasize safety. We decided to buy another brand, and I'm so happy we did. I went with Epoxy Resin, also suited for jewelry. And this resin was better in every way, except for the price, but you get what you pay for, I guess. Epoxy had a longer work time, lower viscosity, which spread nicely on the tokens, and made application a lot quicker. There were also almost no bubbles in the resin after applying it, and we haven't felt any negative side effects while using it. Epoxy also measures by weight, so you can easily get the right measurement every time. If you accidentally drop too much resin on your tokens, here's an easy way to fix them. Wipe the resin off of the face of the token and the edges. This token will now cure, and when it's fully dried, then you can attempt applying resin again. If your resin has hardened and you have this problem, the best way to fix them is using a heat gun to soften up the resin and cut away most of the excess. Use sandpaper to rough up the top layer of resin to give the new coat something to cling onto. If you accidentally sand away too much, just color the side again and use Mod Podge to seal the edge before applying resin. It will look like you have ruined your token, but don't worry, the resin does a really good job of covering up imperfections. It's very satisfying, like you can see here. If you think all of this with resin sounds like too much work, I'll show you some alternatives now. Ranger's Glossy Accents and Mod Podge's Dimensional Magic have some pros and cons. When Dimensional Magic dried, it always got cloudy and unclear, just like my life. Even when I applied a pretty thin layer, I had the same issue with both, where bubbles easily got trapped inside while applying. And I couldn't find a good way to remove them. I tried to remove them with heat to no success, and I also tried to pop the bubbles with a pin, but it always found a way to escape. If you decide to try this method, make sure you don't shake your bottles and store them upside down for a day or two to help the bubbles rise to the top. Another thing you should do to minimize the risk of air bubbles is to not use the first drop. Then when you apply, you should always keep a steady slow pressure on the bottle to not create any bubbles. Keep your nozzle in the accent at all times until you're finished. But even doing this, I felt like this method was too unreliable. I want to know that the result is going to be good and not flip a coin with each token. UV resin could also be an alternative, but I haven't looked into it much. What I've heard is that it's less toxic and cures faster. Let me know in the comments if you have any experience with this, or if you'd like me to make a video on it. And finally, after many hours of hard work, here is the ultimate token upgrade.
making a YouTube tutorial.
Did you buy a new board game?
I don't know what it is. No way.
In the next episode of World of Boardcraft, what's in the mysterious box? Why is Isaac so upset? And why is he interviewing random people on the street? Subscribe to find out.